So this is what you're here for. 2026 will be the year of agentic search. That's what Joe and I are going to talk about. And Joe, of course, I'll let you introduce yourself in a minute, but yeah, many people may know him as he was a long time at Vespa. I think really came into his own, really started to hear a lot from him in the years around when RAG was really coming out, speaking the truth of how search is actually built to the RAG folks. And now he's CEO of Hornet, which is trying to build an agentic search engine, search for agents, not just for people. Of course, I'm Doug. For those who don't know me, I have done search in some form since about 2013. Done all kinds of consulting, and I do a lot of training these days. I do these events frequently, roughly once a week. Um, in a couple weeks, I'm going to host as another event Hugo Bound Anderson, who's a great person to just learn from about building agents. He's going to give a great talk on sort of his experience building agents and not stressing out about all of the. It's very easy to get FOMO if you watch social media for this stuff. And that if you're just solving a problem, you probably need like 10% of that, right? And it's picking the right 10%. So he's going to give a talk on that. Uh, Next week is Haystack, so I'll be there. That's why Renee is here. It may be a quick turnaround if you're not already in the East Coast of the US to come out, but definitely come out. It's a conference dedicated to search relevance, search retrieval. Happens once a year in the US on the East Coast and once a year in Europe. So if you miss this one, there'll be one hopefully in the fall. Finally, or not finally, but last and ultimately, I'll be teaching my Search 101 class, Cheetah Search Essentials. This is a great chance if you just have no idea about search concepts. It's a free course I teach. It's just 3 hour long sessions with notebooks and things that I've in my back pocket. They learn things like what is BM25 or what is an embedding? What do we even think about evaluating search results? So really like core concepts of search. And yeah, check that out. You can always find it software.com/search 101. And finally, for if you want to support all the tokens I spend writing blog articles, I appreciate anyone who wants to come to my class, Cheat at Search with Agents. And we talk about things from building good harnesses to what retrieval looks like for search and what doing things like auto research with agents with the search space. All of these things that seem to come up a lot with the search teams I'm talking to in my consulting practice. So yeah, that's it for events coming up. I think, Joe, do you want to introduce yourself really quickly? Just anything I didn't cover?
No, I think you did a great job.
Okay.
I can add a few words maybe. Yeah, so hi everyone. I'm Joe. I've been working in search for quite some time. I started actually on web search engine that was built here in Trondheim called alltheweb.com. And this was back in 2001. So I've been in the search space for my entire professional career. And now we are building a company and a new type of retrieval engine that is built for agents. It's new type of user of search infrastructure. So I'm quite excited about joining you tonight and talking about agentic search and agentic retrieval, what's changing, what's not changing. I think it's a very interesting period we are in. So excited to be here, Doug.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and maybe just to kick things off, I'm like one thing I've noticed, and I'm curious to get your take on this, is notice there's well, first of all, when people say agentic search, they probably mean like four or five different things.
Yeah.
That's one thing I've noticed. I'm I'm curious to get your take on this. Like one delineation I see for agentic search is you have people who build on one side, you have people who build really rich and robust harnesses to try to make sure that they're gathering the relevant information from whatever search tools they're using. And a lot of their effort is spent in part because we're all learning how to build harnesses right now. A lot of their effort is spent like on the harness side of things. And then on the other side, what when people talk, sometimes when people talk about agentic search, they're talking about topics which I think are I'm only like recently realizing are fairly different, which is the case I just earlier described like assumes you're using the agent's knowledge, but what about cases where the agent needs knowledge? And that feels more like, well, that's what I see with like people using multi-vector search or like more what I think of more as like now deep research.
Mm.
And I'm curious to get your take on that or any other areas where definitions or categories of agentic search you see in the marketplace.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting topic because I think it was Boris, the guy from Anthropic, that invented Claude Code.
Hmm.
He went on the Latent Space podcast and talked about how Claude Code was not using RAG and was
Uh-huh.
instead using agentic search.
Uh,
And that was kind of a fun moment because then everyone said essentially that, oh, RAG is dead and agentic search is the new thing. And the definition then of agentic search was that you have an agent and a harness that is essentially performing grep over your code base
yeah.
to get context to the model. And this kind of created this rag is dead team, I would say. And I think that's because people associate rag with the full kind of vector database, embed
Yeah. Yeah.
everything, do a similarity search. And for a lot of people new in the space, rag meant exactly that, right? So
Mm,
then suddenly agentic search was a new thing because and that was associated using grep. I personally, my definition of agentic search is essentially that you have search infrastructure or a search tool. You can call it harness, maybe it's a stretch, but the key point is that it's the agent that decides the query formulation. For me, that is. So it's not me typing the query, it's the agent that is typing the query into the search box. So that's my kind of broad definition of agentic search, that the agent is the new user. It's
yeah.
formulating the queries. Yeah.
Yeah. And how I'm curious how agents search differently than people,
Yeah.
if you have thoughts on that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I have so many thoughts on this. I think
Uh,
the most interesting. I'm a benchmark guy. I love looking at benchmarks, and one of the most interesting benchmarks out there when it comes to deep research and agentic search is BrowserCom Plus,
oh
which
yeah. Hmm.
is about 830 very difficult questions that are more like a pub quiz type of question. Really long question with lots of hints and years and whatnot, and you have a relatively short answer. So it's quite easy to judge the overall response of the model. And
Mm,
you have a fixed corpus of about 105,000 web pages.
hmm.
And this is like a really gold mine of a data set. So I
Hmm. Hmm.
recommend everyone to check it out. And if you look at the trajectories, so essentially the harness is very simple. It's a simple prompt, just a few paragraphs, like you're a search assistant, blah, blah, blah. You have a question, and here's a search tool. And the search tool is simply search, and it takes a string. And that tool in the official benchmark protocol returns 5 hits, truncated by the 512 first tokens.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then you can look at the trajectories. So on average, you have about 25 search calls that the agent is like deciding to search and reason and search and
Hmm.
reason, search and reason and come
Interesting.
up with an
Yeah.
answer. And I spent a lot of time grepping and analyzing this data. And one of the surprising findings is that one, the queries are really long.
Mm,
So there's about 23 query terms, right? So this is definitely not like AOL search log from back in the day, right, where you had like about two terms on average.
Hmm.
That's one big change. But the most surprising thing
Yeah,
was that there's a lot of phrase queries. There are a lot of phrase queries. And even if you haven't told the agent, like, what is the query syntax that the engine supports, it's doing
interesting.
phrases, it's doing cite, it's doing all kinds of things. So I find that interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And agents can really drive a lot of these like syntaxes that you give it. So yeah, I find that really interesting. Does anyone, I want to make sure it's open. So if anyone else has any thoughts or comments or questions, feel free to raise your hand or jump in with anything. Um, yeah, Tito says agents doing phrase search more than humans is fascinating, surprising. One thing about an agent that's interesting in that regard is they also have a great deal more patience than humans. So if you gave agents some way of searching, like I think you said, it might go through like 15 or 20 different search goals or something like this. Agents will sort of exhaustively go through and spend the time to go through things in a way that and analyze them and reason about them, and also reason about cause and effect. So if I stimulate the search this way, this comes back.
Yeah.
Um, in a way that is somewhat reminiscent of a human researcher using an advanced search tool. But I don't think we have the patience. Or maybe some people have the patience, but I don't have the patience for that anymore. So another thing that I think is interesting is just sometimes when you see these sometimes it's I don't I'd be curious to get your take because one take I have, and feel free to disagree with this, is agents sometimes do better with predictable search tools than they do with search tools where it's not easy to reason about the cause and effect why results came back the way they did.
Mm.
Which
Yeah,
which yeah,
yeah, I think this is obviously in Browser Com Plus, the harness, the prompt is really simple. So the trajectories you get, the queries that the agent is executing are really in a way just showing us the pure way how the GPT-5 model was trained with
yeah,
reinforcement learning. And whatever data went into that mix, it's certainly web search oriented with using the query syntax that is supported by Bing and Google and others,
yeah.
right?
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think there are like 5% of the 20,000 queries that were executed that were actually included the cite operator. So if you've been around for some time, Google, if you type cite colon,
Mm,
you like
mm,
restrict it to a certain domain, that's in there. Year, ranges, things of that nature.
hmm.
And I see Tito here wondering if, oh, sorry, Stavros says, presumably they just have access to the full programmatic search syntax. Yes, they could have if the prompt included it. But in the BrowserCom Plus harness and the setting and the protocol, it's pure, the search tool is just a string, right? Yeah. So
Yeah, it's interesting.
obviously, if you prompt it differently, if you say, here's the syntax that is supported, then obviously it can use that information while searching through, right? But in that
Yeah, yeah.
harness, they don't have that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a when you design agents, there's an interesting thing where if you stay roughly aligned to their training data,
Mm,
you or agents tend to LLMs tend to want to veer back towards the tool usage it knows from the training data. So
exactly.
one reason that people can get some reasonably good results out of grep over a file system of a knowledge base, even an extensive knowledge base, is in part because the frontier labs have spent so much time training that
Yep.
specific thing. Mm. And
Yeah.
same with web search. Yeah,
I think that's a very important observation is whatever you're doing relating to harness or whatnot, right? You should look at what the frontier model companies are optimizing for.
yeah.
what is the training mix? And currently, the training mix is heavily biased towards coding and using the computer through grep, etc., right? And if you use a coding agent, you will see that they are very effective at using grep, right? Multiple
Yeah,
query formulations going into the same grep. And you can exploit that. You can expose search infrastructure that supports grep, right? If you
yeah,
somehow have something that is indexed, you can essentially say, oh, you can grep. And then you intercept that grep call and you can translate that into actual search request to the engine. So I think
yeah,
that's a lot of the current harness engineering is about optimizing for whatever the model companies are doing. And when you're doing that, you're essentially putting yourself on the trajectory of the models getting better, and your harness and performance will automatically get better, right?
mm.
So,
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I think well, to get to maybe answer Tito's question really quick or discuss that is he's wondering if agents have a search query formulation feedback loop based on the results.
yeah,
Mm. And I definitely see that, and you can see that
yeah,
in the if you read
yeah,
any of the mm, like a lot of the original tool usage papers, actually search is a very front and center tool. It's probably the early on, at least, it's the number one tool probably talked about. Mm. And you see
yeah,
that. You see like, oh, I issued this search for some Apple remote, but I messed up. Oh, it didn't seem like the results were right. Let me try a new query. So you definitely see stuff like that.
yeah. No, definitely you find so many. If you look at the trajectories from Browser Chrome Plus, you can download them from Hugging Face, Hugging Face. And it's almost entertaining to see how the model is trying first broadly and then going down into a certain direction and then coming back, doing something else, and then finally figuring out, right? So they're definitely they're definitely learning from what they're observing and what they're seeing. And this also is a very interesting aspect for me as been in the search industry for so long
Hmm.
time. And that is that we usually kind of built the systems around doing a single query, right? You had
Yeah,
query,
100%.
like query understand. When I was at Yahoo, there was like a team, probably like 40, 50 people just working on query understanding,
Hmm.
right? Across the entire Yahoo surface.
Hmm.
And then you would forward that query into a specific vertical, and that vertical will do some similar query understanding. For example, if it was forwarded to local search, you would like try to figure out if this is looking for a business or a particular business or a category. And I feel all of that now, except from latency and complexity and all of that, if we put that aside, is like essentially almost like a solved problem.
Hmm.
And if you in certain domains where you're not constrained by having to have sub-millisecond latency or things like that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Let the agent rip through the data and you get a much better response, right?
yeah,
So I'm like, and I've been working on so many big systems and large QPS, hundred thousands of QPS, billions of documents and whatnot. And it kind of have influenced my thinking around things, being like, oh, you can only do one query, you have to care about latency, performance, and cost. But there's so many domains that you don't have the scale, you don't have the problems with it. It doesn't matter
yeah,
if it takes
totally.
5 seconds, right? Because if the response is great. So I think like the whole search industry and all of us veterans, we're like so biased about, oh, we have to make it super fast. We can only do single query. But there's so many use cases where you're not operating in the scale. You can just let the
Yeah,
agent rip through. So yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And you can pre-compute a lot of stuff too. So
exactly.
a lot of what I do in my courses, we just talk about like, of course, everyone asks, isn't this going to be slow if we have an
Yep.
LLM helping us do query understanding? But even in regular search, and I see people doing this now, it's just people default to, well, let me just have a nightly job. Maybe I'll self-host a model. It doesn't have to be big to like, and it's funny because I'm in the same camp. Like people would spend very highly educated people would spend a lot of time like how do I spell check this type of query?
Yep.
And that would be a multi-month project. And now it's just
Yes.
like the LLM just does it
Yep.
for I will say, like for like the 80% use case, mm, where it gets interesting is probably the 20% or 10% that's left over that's not like general knowledge. Mm. But for a lot of what we used to do that was very extensive and but just for like for English or something, common typos that it's easy to now we just take that for granted that there's a large language model that will help us figure that out, and it's not that hard to self-host and fix some queries or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think
No,
it's
it's
interesting. Oh, go ahead.
definitely exciting times regarding query understanding and also obviously on document understanding. And obviously, there are companies that have complexity around performance and scale, etc.
Hmm. Hmm.
My key observation here is that I've been working with a lot of search teams,
Hmm.
but the case is that there's only been a few organizations that actually have invested in search teams, right? It's
Hmm.
e-commerce,
Yeah.
it's the Yahoos, it's the Google, it's the
Hmm.
Shopifys.
Hmm.
So very few organizations actually in the world have invested in search and search
Hmm.
relevance. And now I think you have to invest in search relevancy because if you actually want to make agents work, if it's deep research, if it's coding agent, you see that retrieval is central it's so central, right? Because of
Yeah,
context
100%.
management and getting whatever relevant information you need to get the job done, right? So that for me is really interesting that so many are now working on getting search right. And I think a nice segue would be to start talking about the actual implementation. You mentioned late interaction, you mentioned embeddings, you mentioned
Hmm.
BM25.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's a great kind of what is working and what is not working. And can you like, and that's also, I think, is where people miss is that, oh, grep is all you need. But yeah, grep is great, and I'm not concerned about grep as a scanning mode versus indexing mode and things like that. But also, it has limitations in terms of expressing how you actually score documents, right?
Yeah,
Which
that's a big
is
one.
quite
Yeah.
interesting. So I think there still you need some hybrid search capability where there's no like single silver bullet if it's late interaction or single vector or BM25. I think a good retrieval engine for agents actually needs to support multiple different retrieval techniques. And then the interesting point is if you expose this as dedicated search tools or if you just wrap it into one search tool, which is also related to the discussion about optimizing for whatever the frontier models have trained the models to do in terms of tool
Yeah.
calling. And the name of the tool is also quite important. So,
Yeah, I've seen two ends of the spectrum. I've seen people basically do so on the one hand, and the frontier labs have trained their models to believe that a search tool is basically going to be pretty good search. It's going to be a Google scale search. And so that would kind of argue towards you should just build one retrieval function that's pretty good, that sort of acts like web search.
mm,
Going against that, we're mostly not implementing web search, and we're mostly not going to be as good at Google as doing this. So the other end of the spectrum is a case where you basically completely unbundle the search stack. And earlier, you would like in the classic search stack, maybe you have some retrieval arms, like your L0 retrieval, that's like maybe single your embeddings or your BM25. And then on top of that, you have some kind of re-ranker, and it could be anything. It could be multi-vector, it could be whatever. Um, it's also interesting to think about, okay, well, what if I just give all of those Lego pieces to an agent? Say,
mm,
here's here's your lexical search tool, here's your embedding search tool. Mm. If you're going to use the embedding search tool, ask a question because this embedding model performs better with that. The lexical is keyword based, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then like say if you want to evaluate the search results, use this re-ranker or something that kind of gives you a sense of what's more relevant than another. Um, that's another interesting architecture that's like, well, in that case, we're kind of watching the agent in a way figure out how to retrieve relevant documents that satisfies this re-ranker. I don't know what the right answer is, but I see people doing basically all of these things and sort of going crazy with lots of different things. Usually not even necessarily a re-ranker, but I think the more classic thing is like an LLM judge that they like or something.
Mhm.
So
No,
yeah,
I think it's a fantastic observation, and I obviously, just like you said, if you expose like here's a semantic search tool, when you're using this tool, use natural questions.
yeah.
Right? And there's a follow-up work on the browser comp dataset from the guys at the University of Glasgow. I can see if I can find it.
Oh, I think I know this paper. Yeah.
It's called something about revisiting text ranking for deep research, where they essentially demonstrate that with a simple harness, the model is actually performing keyword-oriented queries.
Hmm.
So they find that the semantic search, if you put a semantic search implementation below this search tool, it doesn't
Yeah,
actually perform that well because
exactly.
those embedding models have been trained on data sets like natural questions, MS Marco, which are all like question oriented, right? So they actually like build a translation layer to translate like keyword queries into more natural questions
That's
uh,
funny.
that actually could lift the embedding based retrieval, right? So that's interesting, but does this work well or not? Like overall, I think here the problem is simply that if you start giving the model like here's 10 search tools, it's not used to that from the pre-training phases, right? It's
Exactly.
right. So I think you should think a little bit about that when you're building a harness around it. What's the tool called when it's used and trained in the pre-training, or sorry, not the post-training? And you can see this at the GPT OSS model, and you can see the tool layout there, and it's trained to use this tool. And so I think you should actually try to stick to that tool name because that's what
Yeah.
it's used to using, and not confusing with 100 different of search methods. But obviously, you want to build some level of evals. Evals is still relevant.
Yeah. Evals
Um,
are king still. Yeah. Still got to measure.
Yeah, but we've seen this with some in Hornet too, when we've been both with our design partners and also our internal work on agents, is that tool names is quite important. So you can actually change the accuracy of the overall task quite significantly by simply renaming the tool.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I've seen similar things too with talking about I still need to measure this because I've said this a few times, so I need to measure this more quantitatively. But I think agents, if you tell an agent this is 3 out of 5 relevant or this is 4 out of 5 relevant, that doesn't work as well as if you say this made the user feel happy or unhappy.
Yeah,
There's something about making
yeah,
the user
yeah.
happy that's like another one of these hacks because you know these things. You know these things are like basically like are focused on like a specific. They're pleasing the user and that kind of thing. So
Mhm,
yeah, they're sycophantic. Yeah, and
mhm.
the other thing you can do is you can sometimes do these things not necessarily even as a tool call, but as a like as part of the feedback you get, like the sort of automated like in Claude code and other things. There's like hooks and things. Like
Yeah.
when the agent comes back, you can say, "Oh, actually, those aren't relevant" or something like this. So I've also
Yeah.
seen that as more of like an automated step.
Mhm. I see there's a question from the chat. What are your thoughts about native indexing versus doing federated MCP calls? Can native indexing still provide quality benefits with these frontier models? Um, I think that's okay. So by federated MCP calls, I'm assuming that you mean that, hey, we have a set of data silos and each of them provides a search tool, and I want to connect them with my agent versus pulling that data out of these silos and having more of a kind of universal index. I'm not sure. That's my reading of the question. I'm not sure about you, Doug.
Yeah, I I think that's true. My sense of that is when we do just as, and this is my old man search
Yep.
perspective, when we build an index, we're building it to be good at answering or specific questions or accessing data in a specific way. And so federating to all these MCPs, they may not be optimized to answer the questions that you care about. Um, and so I think there is incremental value into building an index that's like targeting the questions, the kinds of questions you want to answer, and the ways that you want to rank results
Mm,
that might not be available. Like you might have a piece of the picture on this MCP and a piece of the picture over there. So my bias as a search person is to build some kind of index. Um, that said, I know agents can are quite resilient. They can do a lot with like some basic dumb tools, but I do think you would get incremental value by actually building like a real index.
yeah. I'm also an old search guy, so I have the same answer. I think also generally most tools or data silos usually don't have a great built-in search. So whatever MCP tool is built on top of it, it's usually just wrapping whatever search is there, and it's usually based on some kind of database search, which is not essentially trying to optimize for relevancy. At least that's my experience, but I'm
True.
obviously biased here. What I do think, and I think you also noticed this in some of your blog posts, is that if you give the agent a pretty dumb search tool, so if we
Yeah.
call BM25 dumb,
Yeah.
it actually works much better when you have an agent because the agent will reformulate the query, it will
Yeah.
explore. So I think actually the ceiling of dumb retrievers are not now much higher because of it's the agent that is doing the query, right? It can do the reformulation, etc. And I saw a blog post float by the other day where the best performing kind of retrieval, it was essentially letting the agent do its thing, but comparing single shot versus multi-shot. So the agent could do one query and then you analyze the retrieval accuracy. And obviously, the method that really performed well when you let the agent actually search multiple times, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
So even a dumb retriever is now better because you have a better searcher. You have like a librarian, like expert at searching at your disposal. So
Yeah, you have I mean, embedding models are highly related to LLMs, and now the semantic layer becomes the LLM and not the embedding model. So
yep, yep,
that's
exactly.
I think that is true. And I think it's also like getting back to interpretability. Like I have seen in my experiments, the agent will understand why search failed more readily with a keyword search. Because the failure modes of keyword search are obvious. It's like, oh wait, this term is ambiguous, so therefore it returned this this result. I'm trying to think of an example, but dress shoes for some reason. Oh, I got dresses back. Oh, I need to maybe I should rewrite this to be more specific or this kind of
Yep,
thing.
yep.
Um, yeah,
Oh,
so I think
it's
that's
a
a
fantastic tool, and the way and by the way, I'm working on a blog post. Obviously, I'm so fascinated by the BrowserCon Plus data set. There's a BM25 baseline in there, but it turns out that baseline is terrible
oh
because
really?
yeah, it's unbelievable. And the reason is this is that they're running with the Anserini defaults, which
Huh?
has been tuned for uniform passage length type of retrieval.
Oh
But
yeah,
BrowserCon Plus
that's
has
like web documents.
web documents, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, the difference is shocking, I'll tell you.
Oh, I
So
wouldn't expect. I know that I know Ansorini has tuned BM25 parameters a lot for MS Marco and stuff.
yeah,
I'm really
but it's
I,
short.
yeah, those are short. But I am surprised how big of a difference it could make if
It's huge.
that's
So
awesome.
yeah, the blog post, the current title of it is BM25. Well, which BM25 do you mean? So it opens with these two methods retrieval are both BM25, but one is 30% point better than the other, and
Oh,
simply by tuning two parameters, right? So still BM25 is still a great baseline if you at least make one effort at adjusting the parameters. So
it's also the kind of thing, and this is an important thing for folks who don't consume research in the field as much, but it's very easy to make a weak BM25 baseline
yeah,
so that your approach looks
yes,
really good.
exactly,
Um, and
exactly. That's
I've accidentally done that myself where I'm like, oh, look, I made search better, but and then I go back and I realize maybe my BM25 just tuned a bit would it's just too weak or something or yeah, so just a word to the wise if you're consuming this stuff.
yeah. And another funny paper related to BrowserCom Plus is that someone wrote a paper about, hey, what if we just lay out all the documents in a flat file structure and we
Uh-huh.
simply use a coding agent to get the question. It has access to grep, tail, head, all the ways the agent can kind of look into the data. And it performs really, really well, right? Because instead of just returning five chunks and all the chunks are kind of truncated after 512 tokens, the coding agent is like, oh, here's a document. I can like, okay, let's do head, let's do grep,
Yeah,
let's figure out where it matches in the document, and then you like get a really, really high score on the entire eval. And I think it's a very refreshing paper. I know obviously if you're building retrieval for infrastructure for billion scale, this might be a very bad idea, but it also demonstrates that if you put yourself on the harness on the kind of trajectory of the model and what the models are good at, then you can actually benefit a lot from that. So I see there's
absolutely. Yeah.
a raised hand from Cody.
Yeah, Cody, you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I didn't know they moved the hand button. You guys were talking about this a second ago, and I want to see if your experience is telling you anything. One of the clear messages I hear here is like how we can give more and more tools, even if they're basic tools, to the agents. Let them be a little more exhaustive, more queries, lower latency. All that stuff is like super cool for rethinking search, but it also seems to put like a whole lot of onus on like post match filtering on the agent side. And then
Yeah,
like at
absolutely.
the same time, I think it was Joe, I think it was Lester maybe who like wrote a post who pointed out that a lot of research is saying even just one or two slightly bad results can really throw like an agent conversation off the
Yeah.
further you go down the tree. So like those two things seem to be kind of like in conflict with each other. But like what is that telling us? Is that saying that we still need to move most of the refinement behind the tool call like in the search stack or you see what I'm saying? Those things are kind of at odds with each other.
Yeah, there I agree. Here there are ways to combat some of this, and that is I'm a big fan of what I call sub-agents, and search as a sub-agent is a really good pattern because you have a main agent that has a context window, it has a set of tools, and search is one of those tools. But when you're calling that search tool, you're actually searching another agent, which is a search agent.
Right. You're refining the context or encapsulating the context and all the mess inside of this
Yes.
other one.
Yes, exactly. And we use that a lot with Hornet and also with our design partners. That's a very strong pattern. And it also allows you to use different type of model with different type of capabilities. And there's one model that is trained to be a sub search agent.
Like the Civ model.
Chroma did one. You had the S1. I think Algolia also, no, sorry, not Algolia, but Glean talked about another model, right? Where you
Hmm.
actually have
Hmm.
trained a smaller model to which is kind of encapsulating the complexity and doing the searches. So that's also a very strong direction, I think. But yeah, distracting the models through prompt injection, which is also a big thing, right? There's also a lot of complexity related to that.
Yeah,
So I think it's like the same sphere. Yeah, there's SID one. Yeah.
yeah. The interesting thing so far, I think we've talked about all the amazing things LLMs are and agents are doing to solve search, given their current knowledge of the world and the domain. What gets interesting is when you and that's like a good portion of the problem. But then when it gets interesting is when you go past that. So this is always what happens in search. And every time I go to a new search problem, there is sort of like the low-hanging fruit. And then there is the stuff very specific to that domain. You kind of only learn maybe from user interactions or people who know the domain really well. And a default LLM doesn't know these things or won't evaluate results in the same way. You can, of course, give the LLM a lot of knowledge create a sub agent that could evaluate the results, or create a model that could evaluate the results to help guide the agent. Or, of course, put that as a re-ranker behind the scenes in search. Or you could go what some of these new models are doing, which I think is really interesting, and we're going to see more of this, I think, is fine-tuning the an agentic search model itself that's both smaller, faster, but more targeted on this like exhaustive search. Oh, I have these backends with imperfect search tools. I'm in charge of evaluating the results. To let the main LLM actually focus on the user's reasoning about the user's problem and
Yeah.
not search itself.
Yeah.
It's an interesting development.
Yeah, and by the way, I have a hot take, and I think that the re-rankers that we were talking about a few years ago, cross encoders,
Hmm.
just outputting a score, unless you're working at eBay or Yahoo or any other scale companies, forget about them. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a dead end now, unless you really want to optimize for kind of latency and cost and things like that. If you are like doing something for the enterprise or you're doing something at a lower scale, forget about specialized re-rankers. It's a dead end now.
yeah, yeah. Uh, Ron, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. Fascinating discussion for sure. Learning a lot. Two-part question. So, based on your conversation, it seems like harnesses and are trained along with the LLM. They kind of go with each other. So, people writing harnesses externally. That would be the other question. Would be Joe kind of referred to intercepting grep and doing real search. Can you also talk a little bit more about that? That's pretty fascinating in terms of you're trying to, as you said, walk in the footsteps of the harness or the trajectory. That's
Yeah.
very fascinating. Thank you.
I think generally, if you look at agents are good at traversing a file system, right?
Hmm.
So if you make your data look like a file system, it doesn't need to be a real file system, but you can make your data look like a file system, right? Then you are automatically putting yourself on the trajectory of where the model companies are kind of training their models with reinforcement learning, right? So the agent will be better at browsing your data, right? And we've seen that direction from multiple companies, and there are plenty of blog posts about it. I think Mintlify did a blog post in that direction.
Yeah, yeah,
So you make it look like something that the model is good at using. And it's good at using grep, and it's good at using head, it's good at using tail, it's good at using these bash tools. So you can make your infrastructure look like that, or in general look like a coding task. And another very promising direction that we are chasing a lot is how you can allow the model to offload some of the processing outside of the context window by writing code.
Mm.
So you can write some code to do something and you can let the agent do that. And then you can save a lot of the context window by letting it do that. And it's also highly relevant for search. I think you also had a blog post that is touching on this topic, Doug. So
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think there's a range there. There's just letting the agent do all its work on its own. Um, and there are techniques like one thing, I think it's all related to this idea of this takes it even further, but like recursive language models are this idea of you can forget about the recursive part, but basically the idea of telling an LLM its quote unquote context is on some Python REPL somewhere in a variable, and you should go and like execute a bunch of code to manipulate it and find what you need.
yep.
I feel like I feel like a lot of these ideas are related to that, um, and kind of get in that direction of like giving agents that know how to code an environment to manipulate the data can be a very effective way for it to navigate that data in a way that is it's been trained to know how to do. Mm.
Doug, to your
Yeah.
comment kind of reminds me of the Cloudflare article on just two tools, search and execute. There was quite a sort of
Oh, I haven't seen
convert.
that.
Yeah. So they essentially said that rather than MCPs overloading the whole context, they essentially wrote two tools. One is search. So you just dump the OpenAPI spec. Search gives you complete code, and then you send the code to their execute tool, which is essentially V8 isolates in the cloud. So just super mini V8 isolates in the cloud. So essentially, it'll write TypeScript out of the first tool.
Yeah.
So it's going along the same lines as you said. LLMs are good at producing code.
Yeah. Yeah. And your
Absolutely.
typical anti-pattern is that you have some tools so that you essentially have to return some context from one tool call and put into another tool call, right? Then you pollute the context window with all that garbage because you're just going to get the result from this call, this MCP server, and then you're going to put that data into a call to another MCP server, right? Instead, you simply say, okay, I'm going to get the data from this place and I'm going to fetch something from here. You're going to do some processing on it. Just write the code to do that. And then you're not wasting any of the context window. So that's the direction that I'm talking about. And it could be things like if you're going to do some post-processing ad hoc of some results from a search tool, right? You can write some ad hoc code to do that, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I see people doing in this direction is, which is my talk next week at Haystack, is doing auto research types of things on search itself.
Yep.
So maybe you can't have an agent in the loop of your search, but and can you use some training data to guide an agent to generate useful search retrieval code? Mm. I find this really interesting too, because I mean, A, you don't need an agent in loop, but it's also very similar to how you would train a learning to rank model or something, because if you basically want to give what I've seen in this space, you're basically kind of giving this coding agent, hey, here are a few set of search primitives, like search this field and get a score, match, like do a filter into this other thing and let it generate code, and then see if you're able to improve whatever metric you're focused on. The big thing with that, with any people do this, try to like when I teach my course, people will show me, hey, I tried to optimize this with Claude Code, the thing that you were building. But when you look at the code, if you just tell Claude Code to optimize something, some relevance thing, you'll see a lot of if then. So if this query, then return this ranked results. If this other query, return these other ranked results. So just like training any other model, you really have to have good holdout data. You have to have a harness in place that tells the agent or tells the coding agent that, hey, you're overfit. And you have to work really hard to prevent these sort of overfit situations. But it can still be a really powerful tool that can give you a piece of code, which is sort of like giving you a model without having to have some kind of like heavy inference hardware somewhere to like to run this model somewhere. So I think that's another interesting application of all this stuff.
Yeah, I'm also going to Berlin Buzzword, where I will be giving a talk about how you can kind of let agents optimize search infrastructure. And it's aligning with what you're saying about Autoresearch. I'm not sure if everyone knows about Autoresearch, but
Oh
maybe
yeah,
you've heard it before. But it's essentially giving an agent some goal and a number to make this number go up. And you set some constraints and you set some test set and holdout set, and then you let the agent rip. It's quite effective for a lot of different things, including performance optimizations, including research, including ranking, lots of interesting aspects there. And also, since models are also the frontier models are relatively good at evaluating relevancy. You can build some pretty amazing feedback loops there, especially for domains where you don't have a lot of user signals. So yeah,
that's
interesting.
true. Yeah. Tito, did you have a question?
Yeah. When I think about agents, I think that ultimately their goal is to complete tasks or achieve some goals, and they don't necessarily have foresight into what are the best sources to search against to accomplish that. Now, with an enterprise agent that's been tuned for a specific task, like I don't know, like some kind of medical or legal agent, you can optimize the model to say, okay, well, these are really good sources, and when you search these, this is how you should search them, etc. But I'm thinking about personal agents or personal
Mm,
tasks
mm,
where, you have people that are trying to accomplish something. Maybe they're trying to, it seems like a lot of the examples that come up in this space are like travel related, just because that domain is complex. Like I want to book a trip and I want you to do all these things.
mm,
Wondering how that how that's working now and how it's going to work in the future, where you have a human who has an agent who's accomplishing a task, and there may be dozens or hundreds of potential sources to search against to accomplish the task. It would seem to me, and with, I'm giving an assumption here that this person's not going to fine tune their agent or do anything like that. It seems like we may be moving towards a world of competitiveness
mm,
in terms of search providers that are optimized for receiving and interpreting and supporting agent searches, and that the ones that do the best at that are going to be the ones where the agents come back, and then the ones who are more brittle or hard to search against or have high latency or who don't have good query relaxation or whatever. Yeah, the agent's not coming back to those. Thoughts on that sort of consumer user agent problem?
oh yeah. Absolutely. And similar area to that I think about is recruiters that go out to lots of job search sites and need to gather candidates. And there, some of these are also long-lived tasks. That's another thing we haven't really gotten into is what does a search look like that is like, I'm searching to fill a job rec over the course of a month, and there's an agent waking up to explore what's on Indeed or what's on LinkedIn. And in these cases, I can see if the LinkedIn search is able to satisfy my agent better than the Indeed search, then there is a competitive advantage. But what would be, and that might work. What I'm really curious about is, will the market go in the direction of, well, you just use LinkedIn's agent and you only stay on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn has that owns the agent, or is the agent something you own? Which is, I guess, your point about personal agents, and you're linking in all of these other things. Now, I don't quite know where the market would go with that. I mean, probably both to some.
The problem that I'm framing is the problem that in a consumer context, the humans may not really be part of the feedback loop.
Mm,
So the human is defining this is the goal. The
mm,
agent
mm.
now is trying to figure out how to satisfy the goal. The agent, in satisfying the goal, let's take your example, Doug, of recruiting, may hit 12 different recruiting sites. And because agents are recursive in their learning, it could be that a very short search visit could prevent that agent from coming back because
Mm.
either you're not getting results or you're getting crappy results. And then the agents that are more optimized for that type of searching give good results. So then now that agent wants to go back there more. And
Absolutely. That's a great
this is
point.
almost like it's like a inverted SEO. And I don't see like people are talking about this issue, but I would imagine that the providers that are set up to be agent friendly are going to be the winners in the future.
Yeah.
I think it's a good observation. I think personalization in search is easier than ever because of in-context learning.
Hmm.
Uh, this used to be very hard, right, to influence ranking and build models for personalization. It's a lot easier now because of in-context learning. I do agree that related to consumer search and the new internet for agents and the web and consumer and all of that, is that API first will be a thing, right? You will see all the search providers that are out there that have interesting data. They will be forced to expose APIs for agents. And obviously, there's like a huge debate about how do you pay these and how do you pay per query and things like that. That's going to be solved. But there's nothing stopping you from, on the API side, having agent to agent communication where your personalized agent will like, here's my preferences, here's the stuff that my user is caring about, and add that to the reasoning trace or adding to the additional parameter for the API call for a different agent. And that different agent will go and search through Amazon or search through LinkedIn or search through web data or Reddit. So there's going to be like a whole new economy around, giving API access and giving agents access to all kinds of data. But the only thing at the moment is that we are stuck at some kind of the pricing, the ads, and all of that, right, is still up in the air how that's going to be solved. How these internet service providers or sorry, these providers are going to be paid for the agent traffic. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. John, maybe last question. And
Oh, hey, this is Jen. I'm from work Glean. So,
oh,
I
hey,
think thanks, Dr.
is
Also.
Waldo is this your work we're talking about with Waldo and everything?
Yeah, we just released that model, so I'm glad that you guys very follow to the market. Yeah, really pleased
That's
to hear
awesome.
that. Yeah.
Well,
So
thanks for coming. Yeah.
yeah,
Very
thank you,
cool.
thank you. I will definitely come in the next time. This is super, super helpful and really appreciate with you guys. I had this quick question. So with your idea, just wanted to follow up on the idea, like we're running like a grip with code on the file system. So we're still having like I feel like you guys are like at the beginning, you guys saying that you are very thinking that indexing is still a direction that like works for follow up, but sounds like with this grip and the file system type of work, this is like sounds like we're not like going to do the indexing, like indexing is not in the loop anymore. So my question is like, what do you think like in the future if which direction is more sounds like promising? And also the second question is, do you think to keep our system of record in the file system is much more important than before? Because both in our indexing of our indexing work and like this kind of like grep with agent generated code work all happen in the file system. So is that make sense that we have to like persist our all data from the database or whatever to a file system in the
Yeah,
company's future? Yeah.
I
I
would
think.
love I would love answering that question, right?
Oh, go for it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean this is a perfect question. I mean, first grep relates to scanning versus indexing, right? Indexing
Yeah.
is simply about optimizing some data structure because you're gonna do searches a lot or you have a large scale and you have to be able to search in with a limited time budget, right? So I don't, you can do BM25 without building an index, right? You can scan through the data if you want to,
Yeah.
and then calculate statistics and keep a top K heap. So I think that discussion is simply like, what do you optimize for? The second answer to that is also that you don't necessarily need to scan. You just make sure that you look like grep, right? You support some of the syntax of grep, but the implementation of it could be powered by something else, right? And the same
Oh.
thing applies to a file system. If you store your data in a database or in a retrieval engine, right, you can build an abstraction layer which makes it look like a file system, right? So you can build a virtual file system on top of it. So you don't have to dump your database into a file system, a real file system, and then let it rip. It's just simply creating abstractions and APIs that look like the tasks that the current models are great at.
Oh, got it. Well, that's very insightful thinking over here. But I really appreciate it, sir.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about it is, if you go to a medium-sized, even large e-commerce site, a lot of how people think about search is in a much more metadata-oriented way than maybe a knowledge-oriented search. So
Yeah.
queries are understood and mapped to different kinds of metadata and things.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about the virtual file systems is it's almost like different perspectives on the data that are organized by different ways of organizing metadata. And then in a sense, that virtual file systems, if you were to write that out on your file system, that is itself a lot of what we think of when we do quote unquote indexing in search. It's sort of like a level of organization of the data.
Yep.
And then when you've organized the data that way, like that is solving a major part of the search problem. So yeah, it's then you're like, can I just get by with grep? Or do I need some kind of scoring is maybe the other part. And maybe one thing that's important that I've noticed when building virtual file system based search is you need to you really miss the scoring sometimes because grep can scan and really fill up the context,
Yep.
whereas the scoring is valuable to sort of like manage context. It's like the top is actually useful to know the top 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you look at the way it's doing grep, and sometimes it includes a regular expression, other times it can just simply use the pipe character to mean like try any of these, right? And you can intercept that and use a real relevancy capable retrieval engine like Hornet to actually search your data in a meaningful way where you're focusing on the relevancy and be much more token efficient than um, what grep is. And I think in essence, we have been working on search for a long time, right? We know about precision, we know about recall, and recall is essentially about finding all the relevant information, right? And precision
Yeah.
is about finding nothing but the relevant information. And that's essentially what context engineering is about, right? You want all the relevant information to get the task done, but that's easy because you can just stuff whatever context you have, all the context, and just stuff it into the window. And then that's perfect recall, right? But that doesn't work really well, right? So you need the precision component. So I feel a lot of the things that we've been working on for 25 years or 20 years on relevancy and precision and recall is now even more relevant because you can apply those same principles to context engineering.
Absolutely. And I probably need to close. This has been a fantastic conversation. And I shared Joe's hornet.dev. You can find Joe basically everywhere on X, on LinkedIn. And yeah, I think this is, if we haven't convinced, hopefully we've convinced you that agentic search is really the thing coming. And we haven't even touched on like all, Joe ended with talking about context engineering. There are many, many, many little search problems. I'm not even sure they're little, but they're search problems like retrieving skills or
Yes.
agentic memory. And it feels like
Yes.
every other day I'm opening social media and like, oh, I have to go learn about this now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a good place to leave it. Please definitely stay in touch. Check me out everywhere. And yeah, hope to see you in a future class or lightning lesson. Thank you so much, Joe, and thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you so much. This has been great. I could talk about search and agentic search, as you can tell,
I
for
know.
hours. So
Same.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.